start this Finance Committee meeting to talk about agenda item number 9, which is approving $80 million to finance a portion of the cost for the Syracuse City School District reconstruction project. So we're taking this opportunity to have a general update about the Jsc B projects. I'd like to welcome Councilor Driscoll, Councilor Green, and Councilor Boyle for coming out this morning, and we have some folks from the school district. So I think the base jump off is just an update on the projects that have started, how they look in terms of their costs, their timelines, and then what's within this 80 million and what their kind of general cost, scope, timelines are for those. So whoever is the lucky presenter, if you want to come up and kind of run with that.
I'm Sean Griffin with Turner. The first sheet here is just the Jsc B board monthly report from last month. The second sheet is just a brief description of.
If you want, you could probably sit right here if that's whatever is comfortable for you.
So the first sheet there, like I said, is last month's board report for the Jsc B. It outlines where we stand on both Tranche 1 and Tranche 2. And then the second sheet is just a summary of the Tranche 2 buildings.
So this is all phase 2 of the Jsc B, Tranche 1,
Correct.
Tranche 2. There will only be 2 tranches within phase 2, right?
Correct.
So the 80 million is for the Tranche 2 projects, or this is just?
For just 2 of the buildings in Tranche 2, Corcoran and Nottingham. We're tentatively calling that a 2A borrowing. And then we'll be back for the balance of the buildings.
What's the balance after?
It is Henniger.
Well, I know I could do the Clary, Elms, Danforth,
Yep.
Corcoran, Henniger, but what's the amount of money for those schools?
Exact dollar figure I don't have in my head right now. I apologize. It's probably another 80 round numbers.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Ballpark.
So the Corcoran and Nottingham are the 2 you said for this one? So they're
Correct.
like more comprehensive
Correct.
changes
There
than the
are
rest?
we've got 3 big projects, the 3 high schools, and 2 of those 3 are in this 2A borrowing. The 2A borrowing also includes 3 other buildings from Tranche 1 where we had to transfer some funds to Bellevue, Ed Smith, and Blodgett.
So as of now, nothing in Tranche 2 has started, right? This is all
Correct.
moving forward. It's all the Tranche 1 stuff that is underway that will continue to be underway.
Yes.
So they'll overlap to some extent, I guess?
Right. So eventually, we're going to come to you asking for $300 million total. So we've gotten the funding on the Tranche 1 projects, and this is the first borrowing for the Tranche 2. But
Tranche 1 plus Tranche 2 equals 300 million.
right.
And then Tranche 1, what was that dollar amount? 115 million. So there's like 105 million roughly that could go to the remaining 2B tranche.
Well,
Or
there's
some of it will have to go to Tranche 1 makeup. Go ahead.
it gets pretty complex quick. So I get involved more on the technical end of building the projects. We work with Turner. They come up with the amounts, and then our finance folks look at what's the cheapest way to borrow it based on the construction schedule. So we have to figure out how we're phasing the projects within schools, just like we have kids out in swing space for the first phase. So what we do is we come up with what we more or less is an ideal construction schedule based on operational needs, and then we look at it financially. And sometimes the way the state reimburses us for this, we have to match all that up. So there's a lot of moving pieces to doing this.
I'm happy to have anybody interject along along the way.
I have a question. It's about the apple pies. No, I'm just I like that one. I actually am copied in, as probably all of you are, on Rex Jardine's emails and statements and everything he ever says. I think that he's a very smart man. And I wonder, I just have two questions regarding Rex says repeatedly that, and I know this isn't necessarily here right now, it's just sort of, we are not maximizing the potential for our state funds because of the square footage of the classrooms that we're putting in?
I don't agree.
No?
What he is doing is he's taking numbers from our building condition surveys. So the state mandates every 5 years we do a building condition survey. So we'll walk through a building and they'll look at a building and they'll look at the roof and the HVAC system and the windows. They'll look at things that need repair immediately, and then they'll look at things that need repair down the road, and they come up with numbers. And those numbers are a very high level, high look. If you're going to renovate a building, you know, sometimes people say, well, renovating that building, that's $250 a square foot, or $200 or $400 a square foot. Those numbers are along those range. When we do final designs and we get along the process, we come in and we take a look at the systems we're actually going to pick in, where we actually say, we're going to put this specific boiler and we're going to repipe the building to these rooms, and we're going to put a radiator here and a univent here, and you come up with a better cost estimate. So what he's done is taking the square footage of buildings and looked at these building condition survey costs and done ratios. It's pretty much meaningless numbers because, one, we're not doing that. And when we go into the renovations, we have to look at the systems and we come up with it. Plus, sometimes, you know, you have a building, we have to take care of the roof. It doesn't matter if it's a huge building or a little building, we got to fix the roof. It is what it is. Now, if you start comparing it to new renovation, yeah, then you can get into some comparisons. But we're not allowed to do that under our legislation, and we're not building new buildings. So.
Okay. So do you feel like in what we are doing, we are maximizing the potential of our state aid?
Yes, we spent a lot of time doing that. In phase one, I'm going to look at Mrs. Slack. What was our aid ratio on phase one? We paid our local share. Right, so about 15 to 20% of our initial project was local share, and on this phase we're looking at 2%.
So I have one other, thank you for answering that question. I have one other question regarding the MWBE. Do you feel that, I know that we've been able to meet those standards?
Well, it's still early, okay? We've met them on the professional service contracts, which has been most of the work. The last report we got, we are meeting them. The only goal I think we're a little low on is the city residency goal. But we've just started the construction. So this is when the big dollars start coming, and they'll be reporting to the Jsc B. Well, they do, I think, a formal report quarterly, and then I think there's a written report that's submitted monthly.
So I had heard that, and this could be completely not true, that in order to meet these standards, we've paid quite a bit more for the work to be done. And I'm wondering, my question is, are we paying more to meet these standards? I'm a little wondering if, I don't want the Jsc B to necessarily be exclusively a jobs program. I want the money to go to the buildings, you know, and to the kids. And it's not, maybe it can't be both, but I just want to make sure that the money primarily is focused on doing what it's meant for, which is improving the buildings. And I want to meet the MWBE standards, but, you know, I don't want to not renovate a school because we're trying to meet these MWBE standards. And I know I'll probably get beat up for saying that. But
the biggest problem we're having, in my opinion, on phase two is getting enough bidders. Okay, we've had very limited bidders on these projects, so we're working hard. We actually got an outreach session scheduled in November to get more people to bid on the projects. When you get more competition, we should get pricing down. Now, some of that's based on the economy. Turner has done some work. Chris Gray could talk about it at a future time, but they've done some work to try to find out what we could do to maximize bidding to try to get more competition. I will say that I don't know the exact amount, but we have gotten bids that we're not happy with, let's put it that way, but this project. I don't think you can blame it all on MBE and WBE. We have a PLA. There's some people that will tell you if you don't have a project labor agreement, you'll save money. We have one project that has lead. That costs more money than a project without lead. So is there a cost to all these programs? Yes. How much? We really can't say. And the only way you could really tell is if you like bid one set of projects with them and one set without them. That'd be the only way we really could compare.
Because I was going to ask something similar to your answer, which is like, what is feasible for us to do to inform how much more we do pay compared to the value of what we're getting for the MWB? Because as I understand it, we may not even be getting full compliance of what we think we're getting by requiring MWBE. So, does it ever? I've heard the governor has at times created opportunities for projects to go through without different standards. Is it ever? I don't think it's possible within the legislation as written, but are there opportunities to like actually try it a different way and see?
Well, for the JSC B, there's a diversity, it's a really long title, Lamont could talk about it, business diversification plan that has specific goals. There was a whole team that put that together. There were public meetings on that. It is a requirement of the legislation that we have things like that. I don't think there's certain numbers in there, but I'm pretty sure we're required by the legislation to do that. So that team came up with that, the JSCB voted on it, and that's basically what all the contracts apply to. So, and it's not just the construction contracts, it's the service contracts too. So the architects, the program manager, construction managers, all have to meet those goals and stuff. And there's residency goals, EEO goals, and dollar goals.
So basically, to get an understanding of the value that the city gets from the requirements in the law, we should talk to Lamont about what we actually get and how.
Yeah, I would refer. Yeah, I would defer to him. It's really not my area of expertise.
That's fair.
I know that there are some organizations in the city that are doing some labor readiness training. Otis Jennings runs one.
Tom, did you want to sit? I don't want to make you stand up there all day. If you're going to be talking a lot, you might as well grab a seat.
Sorry, I was going to say the same thing.
You're going to be sitting here all day. You might as well.
And I know we're not here in this, and maybe it's not the right time to bring this up, but would there ever be a potential to just have the bid go out to everyone, and then whoever gets the bid would have to use labor from, add that labor to their workforce?
This is not my area expertise either, and actually the people that have worked with it, we do have a training program as part of the legislation. It's required. We've gotten graduates from that. They are working now. We've gotten some of the people placed in unions. It's been EOC. They've done a report on that. We could get that report to you. We have that report. Actually, Sean's got a one-page summary of that. So it's actually been successful. We even hired a graduate for the school district that works for me as a custodian. So that's what we've been doing right now. Is it perfect? No. Is it better than phase one? Yes, way better than phase one. So one of the issues with some of the job training, there is some misconceptions. People think that you can grab somebody off the street, give them a little training, and put them on a construction project, and that's not true. Most of the construction jobs today are high-skilled jobs. They're electricians, plumbers. They go through multi-year apprenticeships. So, and to do that, you need a high set of skills, basically. I wouldn't qualify. I have 3 master's degrees, and I couldn't do most of those jobs. So you have to get specific training, and it takes multiple years to get those jobs. In the old days, there were a lot more labor-type jobs on a construction where you had people pushing wheelbarrows around. Now you have lifts that lift all the sheetrock right into the building, or pumps that pump the concrete in. In the old days, you had people wheelbarrowing that. So those types of jobs, yes, you could grab people really quick and go with training. So we've had a number of discussions with the training people on how best to get people to work. And some people have gotten in the union positions, and it's going to take them multiple years, but they are going to become journeyman tradespeople, which is good. And then we've got other people like in the laborers unions, and they're working on their jobs. And then we have other people that go through the training and end up not working for JSCB, but they get other types of jobs. So as long as we get people to work, I think we're doing what we intend to do.
Thanks.
So my question, out of the schools on here, the only one that I drive by every day is Ed Smith.
Yep.
Sometimes it seems a little quiet there. I'm just kind of curious what the schedule is in terms of how far they are progress-wise, and then what's the completion date?
Yep. Right now they're continuing renovation. They're probably about 90% complete with demo through the interior of the building, and they're starting to rough in mechanical, plumbing, and electrical. That's continuing. The gym expansion on the back, we're just starting foundations out there, so you'll see that start to come out of the ground, but it's kind of hard to see when you drive by that come out of the ground. Scheduled completion of that is turnover for occupancy next summer. End of July, August, we'll start moving in furniture, things like that, so we can occupy in September when the kids come for school.
Okay, so but it's pretty confident they'll be back next year?
Yes.
Okay.
The exteriors of Huntington and Grant, what's their timeline?
So the exterior of Huntington, they're putting in the new bus loop out front now. We're scheduled to pave that next week, and hopefully weather holds out and we're able to get that paving complete. And then turn the bus traffic to the front, and then there's another side section over by like where the pool area is. We're going to continue working in that area of the site. Hopefully weather holds out, we're able to get that paving done this fall too. And then next summer come back and finish the rest of the site work there. The interior portion, we're working in the basement.
So at Huntington, will the section between the bus loop and the sidewalk, will that be done this year? Or that won't be done? It'll just be the loop, and then it'll be cordoned off, and then it'll be finished later?
It'll be the loop. You're talking to the front entrance?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sidewalk won't be done until probably next summer.
But we've already improved that, though. I don't know if you've seen it, but we've already cut the curb back. We've made it easier to get buses in there and stuff like that. So it is phased construction, but.
So the benefit will be the bus traffic will be separated from teachers and parents pulling in and out.
I know the bus loop pretty well.
We built, if you drive behind the school, you don't see it from the front. We built a temporary parking lot back there. And my sister's a teacher at the school, so I trust me, I hear it. And it's actually worked better than, in my opinion, than pre-construction. We've been out there a number of days, and we've cut down, I think, the amount. I mean, if you ever watched dismissal at that school, it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
But it's gotten better, and it'll get way better when we get this loop fully built.
Yeah, go.
So if I could just ask, and again, I'm I come from, when you're on the council, you have loads of different, $115 million, $80 million projects that come before you, and you're obviously not going to be able to spend enough time to fully comprehend everything that goes on. So just from an amateur's, outsider's kind of perspective, and not to reference Rex Jardine again, but I'm just curious to, how to say it, I'm curious about the bidding process. So you said there's not a lot of people bidding on stuff?
We're getting 2 bids, 1 bid on our contracts. We'd ideally like to get 5 or 6. And it's public work, it's advertised. There's a couple different reasons going on. 1, you've seen a lot of work going on in the city, a lot of work going on. 2, there's a lot of work going on in the private sector. So contractors are going to bid where they can make the most money. So we have requirements like certified payrolls, and we have requirements on when you can work and things like that. They're going to take the easiest jobs they can get generally. Now, when I'm saying that, when we turn over a building like Bellevue or Ed Smith and say, here's the building, it's all yours, you don't have to work around it, that should be an attractive project for a contractor that bids on schoolwork, because they do that. And we got bids on those. We got, I think, 3 on one, and I think we got 3 on the other, but we would ideally like to be getting 5 or 6 more competition. Some of the suburban districts are seeing the same thing. Turner does work at other districts besides us, but we would like more bids. The more bidders you get, the lower the prices we're going to get.
And so that greatly affects the cost, because again, as I said, like, and I called, you know, as I looked at some of the JSCB numbers, I called some friends of mine who work in construction and stuff just to try to get obviously I'm a novice in this field, but some of the figures like $10 million for the Fowler Field or something,
that's another
issue. A bit like from an outsider's perspective, like being that I make $20,000 a year and a football field is an empty lot. I'm just trying to put that. So yeah, but please explain, like, so that something like that seems to me like, wow, some of these numbers seem out of proportionately high, but I'm curious, as someone who doesn't work in this field or comprehend what the figures should be, if that's an accurate number, or if you feel we're getting the best, to Rex's points about bang for the buck and that kind of stuff. I guess I'm trying to figure out.
Okay. One of Rex's main points is, and you can think about this with the residential house. If you go buy a brand new house, okay, you don't have a driveway, you don't have landscaping, you don't have a paper towel holder in the kitchen, you get a whole bunch of costs. But you can lay that house out perfectly. You have no wasted space, you have all the closets you want, you got the layout you want, on and on. So if you go buy a new house, now if you buy an existing house and renovate it, you generally get more bang for your buck, okay? Because you already have a structure, and even if you have to redo and gut the whole kitchen and the bathrooms and things like that. So if you look at a 2,000 square foot house brand new versus a 2,000 square foot house renovated, most areas of Onondaga County, you're going to be able to get it cheaper by renovating it. So Rex's big point is some of our buildings, let's take like a Clary. We have really gigantic classrooms in Clary. We had a consultant look at this years ago, and they basically told us to knock the building down, okay? They didn't understand how New York State aid works. The way the aid ratios work, we get paid better to renovate. They're actually encouraging you to renovate. So they don't give you enough money really to knock the whole place down and build new.
Could I interrupt you
real
quick?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, and I hate to interrupt, but
No,
I'm just a big sticking point there is, I guess one is that logical? Is the New York State? I mean, it's obviously out of your purview. That's not what your call. The state aid is what it is.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't. The way the state aids school districts does not make sense, not just facilities. So we were on a conference call the other day with the governor's office. They asked the big 5 school districts and one of the first items that came up was the building aid formula. That's what we brought up and talked about that. And we talked about that we did have parents that were concerned about, would like to build new, and the way the formulas go, they don't work that well. But while we're waiting for the state to change them, our buildings keep on aging. So we're trying to.
You have to do what you have to do.
You have to do what we have to do. So
Right, you were talking about Clary in the large rooms. I didn't mean to.
Right. So if you knock it down, or we can use Blodgett as an example. A few years ago, when on JSCB Phase 1, the board looked at building a new building versus renovating the existing building. It was cheaper to renovate the existing building. Now there's other issues, like if you took parkland away, that's a whole bunch of other things. But generally speaking, it's cheaper to renovate than to build new, generally speaking. And if you ask the state, because I've asked them specifically, what can I say when people ask me why the aid ratios are? And what a former person said, the way the state looks at it is, if you're building a middle school, we're going to give you the same aid whether you build new or renovate. We don't care. We're going to give you the same aid. But if you're renovating, you already got a roof, you already got a structure, you already got windows, you already got infrastructure in place. So you're going to get, they're basically driving you to renovate. So, but we have brought it up. If it does change down the road, yeah, that changes. And it affects people like Yonkers, for example, on the call. They are jammed up with students beyond belief. And they really need new buildings, basically. They're out of space in their buildings. So we're really not out of space. We're tight in some of our buildings, especially on the north side, but we're not out of space.
And as far as, so with that, with the costs for some of these renovations, comparatively in the market, I mean, I guess the low bids affects the cost, and that drives the cost up.
Correct. Yeah, the more bidders you have, generally, somebody's going to give you a better price. Somebody's going to be really hungry for the work. No different than you need your driveway sealed. You find somebody that
Right.
is really looking to do it, and you find somebody that's qualified. We have to, we have a lot of rules we have to follow as municipalities that we have to follow. So,
But in general, do we feel like in addition to the bidding process, is the work costed out at a competitive rate, somewhat in the market? Are there checks and balances for that to make sure that?
yes.
Yes.
We have.
What is that process?
You want to, we'll let Sean address it.
Through the design process, we do several estimates to validate we're within budget, and then we put that scope of work out for bid. And to date, we've been able to award everything. So things are coming in slightly higher than we'd like to see them. We're not able to take some of the alternates that we'd like to take, but we are able to do the base core scope of work that we set out to do.
There's estimators too that are hired by the architects or construction managers that actually look at this construction, and they independently estimate it after the architects put the designs together. And before we go to bid, we look at these estimates and what they are, and we look at different things, and then we say, those windows there really cost this. Maybe we could switch to something like this to save money. We try to do that, and it's not just one or two people. It's a whole team of people working on that throughout the design process.
Sean, can you describe the role of Turner overall in this process?
Yep. We're just overseeing the entire project, both schedule, cost, and
Entire
it's
project
simply
being
put.
Tranche 1 and Tranche 2?
Correct, Tranche 1 and Tranche 2. We've got, architects on board that are designing with engineers. We've also got construction managers on board, which are running the projects on each individual site. So we're overseeing them as well.
So you're like the construction manager
Of the whole program,
thing.
yeah.
So you're hiring, or you're involved in managing the architect and the builders and
Right.
all different partners at different schools.
And they're watching over all the money and schedule and things. So they prepare this report. They do a report to the Joint School Construction Board every meeting, and we rely on them. We meet with them multiple times a week going through all projects. So the city's engineering staff and the school district staff.
I have a question on a facility that's actually not on here, but I was hoping this would be a good opportunity for an update. Central High. So obviously we've seen a ton of investment in that neighborhood, and
Yep.
Obviously that building being vacant is a difficult thing for that neighborhood as it gets going. I'm just curious what the update is on that and timelines or anything.
Well, the building, first of all, we tried to do that as JSC B. It's actually listed in the legislation. The problem we had is we could only get, I think it was about 25 to 28 million worth of what we call building aid. That building, when it was turned over to a developer, he cut all the systems out of it, partially renovated. It's got no heating system in it, no plumbing. So I need probably between 40 to 50 million to get it up to where we can make it occupable, so that we put bathrooms in, heating system in there. We have like a temporary heat system in there now, so that it keeps the roof going. The school district, I know the superintendent's had some talks. We would love to get that building back in service. There is no real definitive plan, but I know the superintendent has been working on trying to bring that building forward down the road. We do get calls all the time on it. Somebody wanted to have a haunted house in there. We couldn't do that, but we would love to get it renovated.
I think 50 is way low. Way low. We have estimates of 75.
Wait, I got you.
Yeah,
50 million is way low.
that's to get it occupiable.
And for academic use, is that the?
No, that doesn't include, you'd have to figure out what program you wanted to put in there. Okay. So if you wanted to turn it into a specialty high school, next door ITC is a specialty high school, depending on what programs you would put in there, that would be on top of the money I was talking about. That would just that would get us a certificate of occupancy, basically.
So I guess the question is, I mean, obviously it's been vacant for a long period of time. Like, I know you don't have a definitive timeline, but is it one in the works? Like, what's the general?
I'm not aware of any definitive, but I know the superintendent's been trying to work with some people. He would like to put the building back into use, yes.
Okay.
Has there been any discussion about selling it? No?
Not that I'm aware of. If we did follow that, the school district, there's a process we have to follow. We would declare it basically as surplus property, and then we would turn it over to you folks for dispensation. So.
Regarding like timing, and may I even use the word speed, because it seems like we have this 300 million. The sooner we spend it, the sooner we can ask for more money. But so what's the anticipated end of the tranche 1 stuff? And then maybe if you say 2A and 2B, like how long will 2B bring us into the future before we're done or ready to ask for like a new thing? And then, yeah, that's the start.
So generally speaking, tranche 1 schools will be complete fall of next year, with a couple that probably trickle into the spring of 20. Tranche 2 schools are going to start, but they're larger schools, larger renovations. We're probably going to need 3 years to complete those high schools, just because they're fully occupied schools, and the summers are like gold, and we were only able to get 2 or 3 of them. So we're probably looking for completion of all of the tranche 2 buildings 2022.
So you're saying like spring 2020 through 20.
There's a timeline on your big report here, sort of at the bottom, that shows you. Now, one of the other things that Sean didn't mention, originally we're going to have like all 3 high schools under construction next summer, and if we do that based on what we're heading with bidders, we're going to saturate the market. So Turner and the construction managers have looked real carefully at how to space out these bids to maximize participation, so that we can maximize our dollars, so that we can maximize those construction dollars.
So it seems like we'll be busy with this stuff through almost 2023. And then at what point do we have to consider what we use for the next phase? Like, or do we work within the Jsc B structure again? Do we create a new legal structure? Do we, would you have any thoughts on that process or that type of longer term?
I haven't discussed that with the superintendent. I'm going to look at Mr. DeSantis or Mrs. Slack. Have you guys, I haven't really talked to him about the next phase of work yet.
I mean, given the nature of how things are kind of slow and take time and planning and all of this, is not like, is it almost like now? Is it a year from now, 2 years? Like, when do you guys, as people involved in it, feel like the appropriate time for a conversation about how the structure worked, what didn't work, what could we change, how should we do it in the future based on what we've learned?
The school district contracts with the school district contracts with the Big Five, which is a legislative group that helps us pass appropriate legislation. We met with them this summer to outline what's worked well in Buffalo, Rochester, not yet in Yonkers, and here, and what to change. So we had initial meetings over the summer. With this being an election year, felt that it was important to wait until January, until all of the new state delegates are in place, to start meeting with them. So it will be part of the budget process this year. They sometimes incorporate other legislation in the budget timeframe. So we'll be going through that with them in January, hopefully get it into legislation through this budget cycle. If not, it'll be the next budget cycle, and it'll be termed like a Jsc B Phase 3 for Syracuse. There is also talk, some of us participated on a call with the governor the other day, saying there should be a better way to do this that's a little bit simpler for the Big Five districts. So I think they are thinking about other legislative opportunities. The Constitutional Convention got voted down just last year, so it won't come up again for another 10 years. And in that is the language that specifies that all of our debt hits your debt limit for the city. Part of what we're trying to do is get them to pull that out so that only that 2%, that real gap that we end up paying as local share, should hit our debt limit. We weren't successful in getting the convention to open up for the Constitution to change, but in the conversations with the governor, maybe they have people that have a creative way around that. So we're trying to simplify, but as you said, things take quite a bit of time.
How directly connected or similar are the school construction authorities across the Big Five cities? Like, ours is pretty unique compared, it's different than what it is in the other places, right?
No, they're very similar.
Very similar.
Yeah, not construction, but the composition of their boards and ours have been different over time. But other than that, the processes we go through are very similar.
The demographics are very different, though. Buffalo had a ton of empty schools. They lost a lot of population to parochial and charters. They had a lot of empty buildings, so they had a real easier time. They could cherry pick what schools got the best aid and avoid schools that had bad aid. We don't have that luxury. Yonkers is packed to the gills with students, and they really have a whole different problem. Plus, they have a bigger tax base though. So their finances are really different than ours, and their aid ratio is different than ours. They're what they get for building aid. And Rochester is pretty similar to us, though. We're pretty similar to Rochester.
On that, and this goes back to like a long ago question that Sue had, but when you're talking about the aid ratios, it is like if you had a school with, let's just say, 40 classrooms and 25 students per classroom or something, there is an optimal classroom size, right, that would maximize aid? Like that would
No. Here's where it gets...
Because that's the part that I don't understand. That's the part that is rampantly said over and over again, that small classrooms penalize schools in their aid formula.
No. It's... All right. It gets complex quick. What they do is they base it on building aid units, okay? And there is square footage in there, but it's generally not square footage. It's how many building aid units do you get? So if you might get one building aid unit, depending on what you're building, for a 770 square foot classroom, or a 1,400 square foot classroom, or a 400. Now there is a penalty, I think, at a certain size. If it's below a certain size, then you might only get a half a building aid unit. But where people often get confused is they said, well, you know, we're gonna have 200 more kids in that building next year, so we'll get more aid. No, your building aid units are what they are. So what they do is they take a floor plan and we say, this is a classroom, this is a special ed classroom, this is the gym, this is the cafeteria, and there's a whole formula. They count the building aid units, and then they multiply it times the cost index. That's how we come up with what the building aid is. The cost index can go up and down. It generally goes up because it's based on construction costs. The building aid units, once they're fixed, they're fixed. So we've done that process, and Turner's been instrumental with us, with the architects, to maximize the building aid. We actually got more aid in some of the buildings than we thought we were going to get initially.
So maybe a slightly different version of the same question. So given that every school, no matter how many classrooms, usually has a roof and a gym and a cafeteria and a library, is there an optimum number of classrooms that should be in a school in order to maximize?
No.
No?
So let's give you an example. Remember Bellevue, our school without walls, right?
The one everybody's excited about.
Right. So we did this with Dr. Weeks, and we did it with Bellevue. We basically were able to work, it was a big geometry because we didn't have walls, so we laid out new walls. We were able to get additional classrooms in that building. We drove up the number of BAUs, building aid units. We drove up the aid for the project. So ideally, you want a classroom. SED says it should be at least 770 square feet. Now that's a little different. That's more like code. But from a building aid standpoint, no. And then you get into a practicality. If you have a science classroom, generally nowadays you like an area where the kids can work on the lab work, and then you like a lecture area. So you could have a science classroom that's 1,200 square feet for 20 kids, and that's properly sized.
Okay.
I know there's more questions lurking in here somewhere.
While he's thinking, I do have a question. You know, I was the president of the PTO over at Corcoran, so I have a Corcoran question.
Yeah.
We had met at the school and talked about what the interior renovations were going to look like, and we had said that the parents had requested lockers, floors, and bathrooms. Are those all still part of the project? I mean, in addition to windows.
We ironically was meeting on that last week. Sean, I think some of it's alternate work though, right?
Yep. Currently, we're looking at the lockers in the corridors as an alternate to repair and repaint. The corridors, getting rid of the carpet and reducing the library size to create 2 more classrooms so that it's back to the original, you know, hallway that was there, is in the project. A lot of mechanical systems, replacements of those.
I see that.
The bathrooms are being done. We have to do all those.
Bathrooms are definitely being done.
And then
the lockers
the-
are going to at least be painted.
Well,
At least.
we get
That's an alternate, yes.
and the way they do it, they actually, have you ever seen how they do a car? They like dip it. They actually put a current on it, and they spray them in place.
Electromagnetic.
Right.
light.
So because if we just paint the lockers, the paint will come off, and the kids will scratch their
I
names in
know.
them. So we have to.
However, the process goes, those were the priorities from the parents.
Yeah,
that
that was a
project.
big one, and they wanted a couple parents. We have auditorium seating. I think
Yeah.
that's an alternate.
Yeah, that was one of the other ones. Yeah.
We have that in there. We another alternate was they wanted the cafeteria and the main the entrance. We have that. We've expanded that and made the flow better. That was a big one the school wanted. So if you want, I think we have to have a meeting soon with the principal there. If you want to attend that, we can go through where we are on those. And I don't know all of it. Carmen Malone's been running that project, so he knows the latest and greatest.
Okay.
And just to be clear, so if it's an alternate, it's not necessarily in the project. So if
Right.
the numbers come in well, then we will award it. If they don't come in, we won't. So it's not definite. I don't want anyone to think it is.
What we try to do too is strategize as a team. For example, the auditorium seating. If we can't do that job, if we can get money later, that's a relatively straightforward job. But if you're trying to change like the HVAC in a hallway, while you got that hallway ripped apart, that's when you want to do that type of work. So when we come up with alternates, we don't just look at, we try to find things that we can put later in a project without disrupting the building again.
And Councilor Boyle, that's what the construction managers will do. They'll estimate what the costs are, and then based on those costs, then we have to make decisions as to what we can do in those projects.
And choosing the projects that are directly going to affect the health and experience of the kids has to be a priority, which is why I hope that removing those asbestos floors
That's
in
all
the
going.
library and the hallways are going to be
And cutting windows in the building. We're going to be cutting windows throughout the building. We have to do that.
right.
We're also factoring in the high cost of the way the bids are coming in. So we have to allow for, if those bids come in at, let's say, 5 or 10% more, those allowances have to be put in.
This may already happen. I don't know if it always happens, but when you do the community like presentations on anything, like definitely invite us. I would definitely try to go when you're having the actual like presentation in the school about what's happening. Like I went to the one at Blodgett, but definitely invite us because that's very helpful, I think, for us. Earlier I asked about Huntington and Grant at the same time, and I think we got an answer on Huntington. I don't remember getting an answer on
Nope.
Grant, so the outside of Grant.
Grant is, the exterior grant, continuing to take down the precast that was falling off the building. We're running into some conditions that we weren't expecting to see. So working with the engineers and the contractor to come up with some solutions for that. But the overall timeline for completion of that would be next fall as well.
So you will see over the winter, you'll see they have like a rubber membrane over there. All those pieces are being constructed, I think, down in Pennsylvania. They've taken all sorts of measurements and stuff, and those pieces will be coming back in the spring, and they got to rebuild those towers. Some of those pieces weigh thousands and thousands of pounds, so it's quite a job.
All the schools on the phase 2, tranche 2 don't have estimates because we don't know yet, right? Is that, or we don't know because we haven't bid it? There's no numbers. I don't see any numbers attached to any of them, so.
Yeah, we're working on the estimates, yes.
Okay. When you know the estimates, can you maybe just share
Yep.
as you go?
Yes.
Is there anything you think we should be doing to like make it in long term as, I don't know, easier or better to like, it can be from either the school district perspective or even like a contractor perspective. Are there things that the city should be asking the state partners or whoever in order to most effectively spend the $300 million they give us to renovate our buildings?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any one thing, but it's something that we'll consider, and definitely great to have feedback on things like this, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to streamline the bidding process. We're trying to make it so we get more participation. Some of the laws we have to follow were created in the 1930s. So, down the road, hopefully we can straighten some of those things out. We have a thing, for example, when we advertise in paper, when that law was written, the paper was published every single day. Now it's not published every day. So there's things like that that we have to do. Email, like addendums used to have to get sent certified mail. Well, now you can pull them off the web, or you can email them out. Things like that we have to, you know, change probably some of the regulations and things down the road just to streamline things and make it easier.
Okay. Any other questions, anybody?
Nope.
Well, I appreciate you all making a sudden effort to come and give us a update so we can keep things moving. And I appreciate your willingness to always answer questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.